I stood on the sidewalk in the rain, watching strangers carry my life out of my home in cardboard boxes, my mother's china, my children's baby albums, 37 years of carefully chosen Christmas ornaments. My own family changed the locks while I was at my sister's funeral. "For your own good," they said, voices dripping with rehearsed concern, eyes never quite meeting mine. The neighbors watched from behind curtains, their silence a verdict I hadn't been allowed to challenge. I pressed my palm against the front door, the oak door my late husband had installed, his fingerprints still ghosting the wood beneath mine. And for the first time in my life, I felt what it means to be truly homeless in a place that legally bears your name. The shame arrives first, before the anger, before even the disbelief. It seeps into your bones like December cold, this special humiliation of being deemed unworthy of your own space, your own walls, your own roof. For weeks, I slept on my sister's couch, folding my aging body into a question mark each night, whispering apologies to the darkness for imposing, for existing, for needing. I told no one, not my friends from church, not my colleagues from the school where I'd taught for 26 years. What words explain being erased from your own story? How do you admit that your son and daughter-in-law decided you were too fragile, too lonely, too much of an inconvenience to remain the heroine of your own life? So I carried my secret in silence, learning how heavy wordlessness can be when it's filled with everything you cannot bear to say. They didn't know about the deed hidden in the old family Bible, the one my father had given me, telling me to keep it safe, just in case family turns to stranger, just in case blood betrays blood, just in case love calcifies into convenience. The night before he went into hospice, Robert propped against pillows, his once strong hand shaking as he wrote, his voice barely audible as he explained what the letter contained, why it might someday be necessary, who should witness its opening if that day ever arrived. He had the hospice chaplain and the night nurse witness his signature. He wanted to be certain it would be legally binding if circumstances required its contents to be known. The careful phrasing, the deliberate avoidance of direct accusation, of explicit naming of what has been happening, offers a narrow bridge across the chasm opening between us, a possible path toward resolution that doesn't require complete destruction of family bonds alongside the necessary dismantling of financial deception. What would you do if you discovered that your entire legacy had been miscalculated? Not in dollars and cents, but in the fundamental currency of love and loyalty. If the children you raised to understand compassion and integrity revealed themselves as strangers wearing familiar faces? If the conversations you weren't meant to hear exposed not just disappointment, but a complete absence of the values you believed were your most important bequest? I lay in that hospital bed, tubes invading my body while machines translated my existence into numerical values, and contemplated this precise question. Each beep of the heart monitor became the ticking clock of decision. Each bag of fluid dripping into my veins carried not just saline and medication, but crystallizing clarity about what must happen next. My right side remained paralyzed from the stroke, but my left hand could still move when no one was watching, could still sign documents when the right visitor arrived. Tomorrow, they'll gather at the attorney's office, dressed appropriately in the somber colors of recent bereavement, tissues clutched in manicured hands that never once reached for mine during those final weeks. They'll sit in leather chairs arranged around a mahogany table, expectations practically vibrating beneath practiced expressions of grief. The attorney, not the one they're expecting, but one they've never met, will remove papers from a sealed envelope I signed with my left hand the night before their scheduled meeting about end-of-life decisions that never included me in the planning. And as the document is read aloud, as understanding dawns across faces that share my features, but apparently nothing of my heart, they'll learn that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's left behind when someone dies, but what's revealed when someone almost does. The lamplight casts unfamiliar shadows across my sister's living room, where I've spent 3 weeks sleeping on a couch never designed for night after night of restless turning. Outside, rain taps against windows with insistent fingers, mimicking the steady drip of humiliation that has been my constant companion since the day I stood on my own front walkway, watching strangers carry my belongings to a storage unit I never authorized. My body aches from the nightly contortion required to fit on this too-short sofa, but the physical discomfort pales against the hollow space that's opened inside my chest since Michael and Caroline changed the locks while I buried my only sister. The Afghan draped across my legs belonged to our mother, one of the few family heirlooms I managed to keep with me instead of seeing it boxed away by people who claim to be protecting me from myself. The irony doesn't escape me. Wrapped in my mother's handiwork while homeless despite owning a 3-bedroom colonial less than 4 miles away. Mom's just not thinking clearly since Dad died. I overheard Michael tell my sister's neighbor yesterday, his voice carrying that particular tone of concerned authority he's perfected since completing his MBA 2 years ago. We're just making sure she doesn't make any hasty decisions during her grief. The explanation sounds reasonable, compassionate even, until you recognize the assumption underlying it, that 67 years of living, of teaching elementary school children, of managing household finances alongside my husband for 42 years, has somehow left me incapable of determining where and how I should live. The living room clock ticks with metronome precision, marking time that feels simultaneously suspended and racing forward, each minute both interminable and precious as I count down toward tomorrow's meeting at Edward Abernathy's law office. The meeting my son and daughter-in-law believe will formalize their authority over my property and person. My fingers trace the edges of the Bible resting beside me on the couch. Not just scripture, but family archive. Its leather cover worn smooth by generations of hands seeking comfort or recording milestones. Between Psalms and Proverbs lies the deed Robert insisted we place there the week before entering hospice care, his voice still strong despite the body failing around it. People change when money's involved, Helen. Even good people. Even family. I dismissed his concerns then, believing our son incapable of the calculations that have since revealed themselves in spreadsheets I wasn't meant to see, in conversations outside hospital rooms they thought I couldn't hear. In the gradual repositioning from son to manager of assets he appears to consider already his. The deed bears only my name now, transferred fully after Robert's death despite what Michael believes occurred, what he explained with such confidence to the locksmith who changed the tumblers on doors I've opened with the same key for 26 years. From the kitchen comes the subtle hum of my sister's refrigerator, a counterpoint to rain against windows and painful thoughts circling without resolution. Sarah's home has become temporary sanctuary, its guest bath containing the few toiletries I grabbed from my bathroom counter during those shocked moments when understanding first dawned. That the short visit to support me through Sarah's funeral had actually been carefully orchestrated to empty my home while I stood graveside. My toothbrush in a plastic travel case, a half-empty bottle of prescription sleep aids, 3 changes of clothes selected for funeral propriety rather than extended stay. These meager possessions now define my physical existence while the contents of a 4-bedroom house sit in storage units whose location I haven't been told, whose keys remain in Caroline's designer purse, alongside the phone containing photos of my concerning behavior they've compiled to support their narrative of incompetence. The rain intensifies, droplets merging into sheets that transform the window into rippling mirror, reflecting this strange tableau. Elderly woman on borrowed couch, surrounded by another's possessions, wrapped in family heirloom that survived multiple generations only to witness this particular indignity. Tomorrow, the performance will reach its climax in Edward's wood-paneled office, where Michael and Caroline expect to meet with the family attorney to discuss transition plans and supportive living arrangements, euphemisms for the assisted facility brochures I found in Caroline's tote bag last week. The ones featuring smiling seniors engaged in structured activities beneath banners promising peace of mind for the whole family. What they don't know, what Edward has carefully protected since my tearful call from Sarah's bathroom 3 weeks ago, is that the attorney they'll meet isn't the one they're expecting, and the documents awaiting signatures bear little resemblance to the transfer of authority they've been planning since Robert's diagnosis first suggested my eventual solitude. The Bible's pages rustle as I carefully extract the deed and letter Robert prepared. both documents now carried everywhere like talisman against forces that transformed family into adversaries, love into strategic calculation, concern into control disguised as care. The living room suddenly feels too small to contain the magnitude of tomorrow's inevitable confrontation, too fragile to withstand the seismic redistribution of power that will occur when legal reality collides with assumptions constructed on foundation of selective truth and deliberate misinformation. Have you ever experienced that terrible moment when you realize loved ones have been measuring your worth not in memories shared or connection maintained, but in assets they believe themselves entitled to control? Have you felt the peculiar combination of heartbreak and clarity that arrives when masks slip to reveal calculation beneath expressions of concern, when protection becomes pretext for appropriation that would have continued unchallenged had circumstance not revealed its true nature? The leather chair creaks softly as I shift position, its embrace more substantial than my sister's couch, but somehow less comforting in this moment of imminent collision between expectations and reality. Edward Abernathy's office surrounds us with the quiet authority of polished mahogany and leather-bound law books, familiar territory from decades of tax preparations and will revisions, now transformed into battleground where familial bonds face their final test. Outside the tall windows, morning sunlight bathes downtown buildings in golden light that feels disconnected from the fluorescent illumination inside, from the weight of documents stacked neatly on Edward's desk, awaiting their moment in this carefully orchestrated revelation. My hands rest in my lap, fingers intertwined to hide their slight trembling, not from fear, but from anticipation tinged with something that feels uncomfortably like satisfaction, like vindication purchased at price too steep for celebration. "They've confirmed attendance," Edward says, consulting his watch with the precise movements that have characterized our 40-year friendship. Caroline texted that they're looking for parking. His tone carries professional neutrality layered over personal indignation he's maintained since reviewing evidence of my situation 3 weeks ago. Since comparing property records against documents Michael presented as proof of authority he never legally possessed. The conference room down the hall has been prepared according to my instructions. Water carafes placed at precise intervals, legal documents arranged in specific sequence, chairs positioned to create subtle psychological advantage through physical positioning. Even now, retired from classroom management after 26 years teaching elementary school, I find myself calculating environmental factors that influence human behavior, that create framework for revelations requiring careful containment to prevent complete fracture of relationships already stretched beyond recognition. The door to Edward's private office opens without preliminary knock, Caroline entering first with characteristic assumption of welcome, Michael following with apologetic glance toward his watch suggesting traffic delays rather than deliberate timing designed to establish control through minor disruption. "So sorry we're running behind," Caroline offers without actual contrition, designer purse landing on edge of Edward's desk with proprietary confidence that assumes shared perspective, shared purpose, shared understanding of my position as subject rather than participant in decisions regarding my future. "The parking downtown is impossible these days." Her gaze passes over me with practiced concern that doesn't quite mask the assessment beneath, cataloging my appearance for signs of decline that might support narrative of incapacity, carefully constructed through selective documentation and strategic interpretation of grief-induced withdrawal following Robert's death and Sarah's funeral occurring within 6 months of each other. Michael moves toward me with arms extended for expected embrace that falters as I remain seated, as physical distance maintains psychological boundary, established through careful consideration rather than emotional reaction to betrayal still raw, despite 3 weeks partial healing. "Mom," he says, voice carrying that particular tone of exaggerated patience reserved for children and those deemed incapable of full comprehension, "you look tired. Are you getting enough rest at Aunt Sarah's?" The question contains its own answer, its own justification for actions taken without consent or consultation. Presumed fatigue proving necessity for intervention, for protections implemented through changed locks and storage units and bank account restrictions discovered only through Sarah's neighbor, driving me to branch where manager recognized inconsistencies between documentation presented and account histories maintained through decades of careful financial management. Edward rises from behind his desk, professional demeanor providing momentary buffer between emotional currents circulating beneath social performance maintained by all participants in this carefully scripted interaction. "I've prepared the conference room," he announces, gesturing toward hallway with subtle nod acknowledging private understanding established through preparation conducted while Michael and Caroline believed me safely contained within narrative they'd constructed without accounting for relationships extending beyond immediate family, beyond connections they could monitor through controlled access to phone and transportation, following what they described to neighbors and friends as temporary relocation during period of adjustment. The conference room awaits with its carefully arranged documents, its strategically positioned chairs, its transformation of private betrayal into legal confrontation that will permanently alter family dynamics regardless of specific outcome. We process silently down carpeted hallway, Edward leading with professional authority, Caroline and Michael following with confidence born of anticipated validation, me bringing up rear with careful steps belying internal certainty built upon documentation assembled across weeks of strategic preparation. The conference room door opens to reveal not just arranged legal papers but unexpected presence, Sarah's neighbor Martha, who drove me to appointments with Edward while Michael believed me safely contained at sister's house, bank manager Thomas Reynolds, whose 20-year relationship with our family accounts provided critical verification of documentation manipulation, Robert's hospice nurse Jessica, whose witness signature on final papers contradicts narrative Michael presented to locksmith and storage company employees. The tableau freezes Caroline mid-step, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion to first flickers of recognition that script she believed controlling might contain significant revisions outside her awareness or authority. Have you ever witnessed the precise moment when someone realizes narrative they've constructed is built upon assumptions about to be systematically dismantled? When control they believed established through careful manipulation encounters, foundation more solid than temporary advantage created through selective information and strategic timing. The conference room table gleams beneath carefully arranged documents, its polished surface reflecting overhead lights like still water soon to be disturbed by stones thrown with deliberate force. The chairs position us like actors in carefully blocked scene, Edward at head where authority naturally resides, Michael and Caroline on one side facing unexpected witnesses arranged opposite them, me seated at foot with unobstructed view of every face, soon to register sequence of revelations meticulously planned during weeks. They believed me safely managed through isolation and restricted access to resources. The room smells faintly of lemon polish and expensive coffee brewing in corner carafe, ordinary comforts surrounding extraordinary confrontation about to unfold through documentation impossible to dismiss through individual explanation or emotional deflection. The manila folders laid precisely before each seat contain identical copies of evidence assembled, property deeds bearing only my name, account statements documenting unauthorized access attempts, medical evaluations contradicting claims of cognitive decline presented to locksmith and storage facility employees. "Before we begin," Edward says, professional tone belying 4 decades of friendship and 3 weeks of strategic preparation, "I want to clarify that this meeting was called at Helen's request, not to discuss guardianship arrangements, but to address several legal matters requiring immediate attention." The statement lands with calculated impact. First indication that script Michael and Caroline believed controlling contains significant revisions outside their authorship or approval. Caroline's manicured fingers tighten around leather portfolio she brought containing documents now rendered irrelevant by folders already distributed, by witnesses already seated, by narrative already shifting from presumed conclusion toward actual beginning only now becoming visible through deliberate removal of carefully constructed concealment. Michael's expression shifts more slowly, confusion gradually yielding to dawning recognition that assumptions underlying recent actions may contain critical miscalculations about legal standing, never actually transferred, despite documents presented to various service providers during what they described as necessary intervention conducted for my protection. There seems to be some confusion, Caroline interjects, corporate training evident in immediate attempt to redirect conversation toward territory she believes more favorable. We're here to discuss Mom's care plan moving forward, given her recent episodes following Dad's passing. The euphemism, episodes for grief-induced withdrawal, for temporary disconnection following dual losses of husband and sister within 6-month span, hangs in air between us, its inadequacy emphasized by silent presence of hospice nurse Jessica, whose professional documentation of my mental clarity during Robert's final days directly contradicts narrative constructed through selective interpretation of normal grief responses. Martha's steady gaze from across table provides additional witness to daily functioning maintained despite emotional devastation, meals prepared, correspondence managed, household maintenance addressed through ordinary competence rather than extraordinary effort during weeks following Sarah's funeral, and preceding locked doors encountered upon return to home, bearing my name alone on legal documentation. Edward opens the folder before him with deliberate movements, removing property deed bearing registration date preceding Robert's death by 18 months. Transfer completed during estate planning, conducted with full cognitive function, rather than during medical crisis deliberately misrepresented to create appearance of opportunity for intervention, never legally established or personally warranted. This is the current deed to the property at 427 Maple Street, he states, voice carrying professional neutrality that somehow emphasizes rather than diminishes significance of document now visible to all participants. As you can see, it bears Helen's name as sole owner, transferred from joint ownership while Robert was still living and of sound mind, as attested by 2 witnesses including myself. The evidence sits between us. Irrefutable confirmation that locks changed on doors, technically constituted illegal entry to property belonging solely to person excluded through actions justified through concern, never validated through legal process or medical evaluation. Michael's face undergoes remarkable transformation, confidence draining visibly as implications register, as understanding dawns that actions taken with assumed authority rest on documentation, insufficient to establish legal standing, presented to various service providers. There must be some mistake, he begins, legal training emerging in careful phrasing, avoiding direct claim while suggesting possibility of error requiring correction. Dad always intended... The sentence remains unfinished as Edward slides second document forward. Robert's letter, witnessed by hospice chaplain and nurse Jessica, detailing explicit intentions regarding property disposition and decision-making authority following his death. The handwriting, shaky but legible, carries Robert's distinctive style, his voice almost audible in phrasing familiar through 42 years of shared life. I, Robert James Wilson, being of sound mind though failing body, hereby affirm my full support and confidence in my wife Helen's ability to manage all aspects of our shared property and finances following my passing, without supervision or intervention from our son Michael or any other party. The silence stretches between us. Weight of written evidence overwhelming verbal counterarguments not yet formulated, but visible in Caroline's tightening jaw, in Michael's quickened breathing, in subtle repositioning as physical discomfort reflects psychological recalibration, required by documentation impossible to dismiss through individual explanation or emotional deflection. The coffee carafe in corner releases single drip that lands with audible plop against glass warming plate. Ordinary sound amplified through collective attention, momentarily diverted from confrontation, neither wished for nor sought but made necessary through actions taken without legal standing or personal justification. My hands remain steady now, trembling replaced by calm certainty that truth documented carries weight beyond emotional reaction, beyond temporary advantage created through selective information and strategic timing. Have you ever witnessed someone's carefully constructed reality collapse beneath weight of evidence impossible to reinterpret or dismiss? Have you felt the strange mixture of vindication and sorrow that accompanies necessary confrontation with loved ones, whose actions reveal priorities fundamentally different from values they claim to honor, through concerns expressed, but contradicted through methods employed? The key slides into the lock with familiar resistance. The slight catch halfway through the turn that Robert always meant to fix but never did, one of countless small imperfections that transform house into home through their very persistence. The front door swings open to release scents instantly recognizable. Lemon oil on wooden banisters, lingering traces of the potpourri Sarah had given me last Christmas, the subtle mustiness of rooms closed too long without circulation. 3 days since the attorney's office confrontation, since property rights were legally re-established through documentation impossible to dismiss, since chastened locksmith returned to restore original tumblers matching key I've carried for 26 years. The entry hall stretches before me, walls lined with photographs temporarily removed but now returned to proper placement, creating visual timeline of family history requiring significant reinterpretation in light of recent actions revealing priorities previously concealed beneath expressions of concern and affection that now carry weight of performance rather than genuine connection. My footsteps echo against hardwood floors as I move through rooms simultaneously familiar and strange, spaces containing lifetime of accumulated objects and memories now viewed through lens forever altered by knowledge that family I believed understanding connection beyond material value had measured home's worth primarily through market assessment and potential liquidation value. The living room furniture has been returned from storage, armchair positioned exactly where it stood before removal, coffee table bearing same water ring from last Christmas when Michael's son placed hot chocolate without coaster during gift opening that now seems to belong to different lifetime, different family, different understanding of connections I believed transcended material considerations. The grandfather clock in corner, wedding gift from Robert's parents, timekeeper through 42 years of ordinary days and extraordinary moments, ticks with steady rhythm suggesting continuity despite interruption, despite 3-week absence from rightful place against wall, where shadow remained slightly darker than surrounding paint. The kitchen reveals evidence of hasty return, cabinet doors not quite closed, refrigerator humming with renewed purpose but containing only items purchased yesterday during grocery delivery, arranged through Edward's assistant, dish towels rehung on rack but folded differently than my habitual method. The magnets on refrigerator have been restored. Photos of grandchildren, appointment reminders, shopping list partially completed in my handwriting before funeral trip transformed into unexpected exile through locks changed without legal authority or personal justification. The breakfast nook table, site of countless family meals, homework sessions, holiday preparations, and quiet coffee mornings with Robert, stands surrounded by chairs returned to positions close enough to original placement to appear undisturbed to casual observation, but recognizably altered to someone who has spent decades arranging this space according to particular preferences and practical considerations never shared but deeply ingrained through years of daily habitation. Upstairs, the master bedroom waits with peculiar mixture of familiar comfort and lingering violation. Space most intimate now bearing evidence of hands, touching, sorting, evaluating belongings without permission, or presence of person whose identity remains embedded in objects arranged according to private meaning rather than visible value. The closet has been restored. Clothes returned to proper rods but hanging with subtle differences in organization, in spacing, in arrangement previously maintained through decades of habitual placement. The bedside table holds lamp positioned precisely as it always was, but drawer reveals disturbed contents. Reading glasses case now sitting atop journal rather than beside it. Prescription sleep aids in different position than habitual placement maintained through years of nightly ritual. The photographs returned to dresser top include images selected for display through emotional significance rather than aesthetic quality. Robert teaching Michael to ride bicycle, grandchildren's first visit to meet new brother, Sarah and I standing before childhood home during final visit before our parents sold property containing earliest memories, now carried only in shared recollections, suddenly more precious following her unexpected passing. The guest bedroom that served as Sarah's room during her final illness has been restored with particular attention to detail. Perhaps recognition of sensitivity surrounding space last occupied by recently departed sister, perhaps awareness of significance beyond ordinary guest accommodations. The quilt our mother made drapes across bed precisely as Sarah had arranged it. The water glass remains on nightstand as if awaiting return that will never come. the novel with bookmarks still protruding from chapter never completed. This room alone appears genuinely undisturbed beyond necessary removal and return. Sacred space somehow recognized as requiring particular respect, despite general disregard for boundaries demonstrated through comprehensive displacement of belongings, justified through concern, never validated through legal process or personal consultation. The recognition of this single concession to genuine sentiment creates complex emotional response. Appreciation for sensitivity shown alongside deeper questioning of selective respect, demonstrated toward one relationship, while another was systematically undermined through actions revealing priorities fundamentally different from values claimed. The home office, Robert's domain, gradually transformed to shared space as his illness progressed and financial management transferred increasingly to my responsibility, bears most visible evidence of purposeful examination. The filing cabinet drawers hang slightly open, revealing folders rifled through with insufficient attention to original organization maintained through decades of careful record-keeping. The desk, surface now cleared of papers present before unexpected exile, stands with drawers returned to closed position, but contents visibly rearranged according to priorities different from system developed through years of practical usage. The computer remains in proper position, but keyboard sits at slightly different angle than habitual placement, mouse positioned on opposite side from customary arrangement, maintained through decades of right-handed usage. This room, containing physical evidence of financial management and property ownership, clearly received most thorough examination during 3-week period, when access remained restricted through locks changed without legal authority, but with confidence suggesting certainty never justified through actual documentation or legitimate process. Have you ever returned to space once considered ultimate sanctuary, only to find invisible fingerprints remaining on objects superficially restored, but fundamentally altered through knowledge that hands touched, evaluated, and rearranged according to values different from those you believed shared? Have you discovered that reclaiming physical territory represents only first step in rebuilding security, shattered not just through actions taken, but through revelation of priorities previously concealed beneath expressions of concern, masking considerations more calculated than connection you believed fundamental to relationships now requiring complete reassessment? The porch swing sways gently in the evening breeze, its familiar creak a counterpoint to crickets emerging with early summer twilight. 6 months since the locks were restored, since belongings returned to places almost right, but never quite the same, since family redefined itself through choices made and consequences accepted, rather than bonds assumed and expectations maintained without examination. The wisteria Robert planted 15 years ago has finally reached the arbor's peak, its purple blooms cascading down columns like memories finding their proper place. Beautiful, despite origins in conflict, fragrant beyond proportion to their size, persistent through seasons of dormancy and flourishing with equal determination. Tonight the porch light remains unlit, allowing starlight to cast subtle illumination across floorboards that have witnessed homecomings and departures, celebrations and losses. The ordinary passages that accumulate into what we call a life when viewed through distance only time can provide. The dining room table inside no longer stretches to accommodate Sunday gatherings that gradually ceased after the attorney's office revelation, after documentation demonstrated priority of property over presence, of possession over connection. The empty chairs speak their own language of absence, not just physical removal, but emotional vacancy that opened slowly as understanding deepened that certain fractures cannot be mended through pretense or performance, through words contradicted by actions revealing values fundamentally different from those claimed through expressions of concern, masking considerations more calculated than the love I believed central to our shared story. Michael still calls on birthdays and holidays, his voice carrying that particular strain of someone navigating territory forever, altered by truth impossible to unknow once revealed through necessity rather than choice. His children visit occasionally, innocence in adult conflict they sense but cannot fully comprehend. Their presence both comfort and reminder of continuity that persists despite disruption. of connections that transcend transactions measured through material value rather than meaning accumulated across generations. The family Bible rests open on the side table beside my reading chair, its pages turned to passages about inheritance, not just physical property, but wisdom transmitted, values demonstrated, priorities revealed through actions rather than claimed through words contradicted by choices made when opportunity appeared. Robert's letter remains tucked between these pages, his handwriting increasingly precious as tangible evidence of presence now existing only in memory and artifacts preserved through deliberate intention rather than casual accumulation. The hospice nurse called last week, her continuing friendship unexpected gift emerging from circumstances that revealed priorities with clarifying precision impossible during ordinary interactions protected by social convention and assumed understanding. Martha from next door brings weekly casseroles despite my protests, her practical compassion demonstrating community extending beyond bloodlines, her presence reminder that connections can form through shared experience rather than shared DNA, through recognition of humanity rather than obligation of relation. The key to my front door hangs from the same keychain it has for 26 years, its familiar weight against my palm when returning from grocery shopping or neighborhood walks, a reminder that security exists in multiple forms: legal documentation proving ownership, physical access maintained through locks matching original key, emotional certainty established through truth revealed rather than fiction maintained for comfort or convenience. The hallway photographs have been rearranged, timeline no longer chronological, but curated through meaning discovered rather than assumed, through connections revealed as genuine rather than performed for appearance. Some frames stand empty. Space is maintained as recognition that certain images require reconsideration. When context changes, when understanding deepens, when priorities previously hidden emerge through actions taken when opportunity revealed values different from those claimed. Sarah's bedroom remains untouched. Sacred space, honoring sister, whose absence created vulnerability, exploited but whose memory provides continuing comfort through recognition that some relationships prove themselves genuine, even when tested by circumstance beyond control or anticipation. The most valuable inheritance I've discovered isn't contained in property deeds or legal documents, but in the recognition that boundaries established through necessity often create clarity impossible during comfortable accommodation, that permits growth of assumptions unchallenged until crisis reveals what always existed beneath surfaces maintained through mutual agreement to see only what confirms beliefs we need rather than truths awaiting acknowledgement. Have you noticed how sometimes the most precious gift hidden within betrayal is the freedom that arrives when pretense becomes impossible? When relationships must either transform through honest reassessment or dissolve through continued performance, neither wishes to maintain once truth has illuminated what was always present, but carefully concealed behind expressions presented as love, but revealed as calculation, when opportunity suggested advantage available through temporary vulnerability.